Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Strand Tennis Center podcast, filled with tips, advice, tennis, not tennis, just life advice too, whatever you need. Like it on YouTube, share it on the podcast as well. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Everybody, welcome to the Strand Tennis Center podcast. It's been a few weeks. I'm Steve Capo. I'm your host. We've got a couple of updates before I go into my podcast. We're happy to have George here filming. Thank you, George, for being here. I appreciate it. You don't have to say anything, George. But Santi, who was fantastic for us, moved to California, and he's filming and teaching out there. And we should give him a little love. It's called Join City Tennis, which is a nice little spot. It's part of the, kind of the public works program. So he's teaching out there and doing filming and doing snowboarding with his shirt off. If you see his posts on Instagram, he's having a good time. He always wanted to be outside and do outdoor stuff and be around the water and things like that. But I always told him, I said, you got the water on the East Coast. Why don't you just live down the beach? But he decided to make a move, and we're happy for him. I hope he does well. So what I wanted to get into today, because I've been curating a lot of books lately. I've been in my book mode. It's been a little crazy. So I want to go over some stuff, and in general with reading. So reading, people aren't doing it enough. Obviously, we're too caught up on like quick blasts, Twitter, things like that. We're not really reading anything anymore, not sticking to it. Try to read books that aren't 10 years old, not 5 years old. Try to read books that are almost close to 100 years old or 80 years old, because if you look at those books, those writers didn't have anything to sell. They weren't promoting a podcast. They weren't saying, all right, I sell enough, I get these books and I create a mastermind and we're doing this, and they're selling, and they're using their book to sell something else. These books that were written 100 years ago, 80 years ago, these were curated over someone's life. They gathered this material and just wanted to share it with a few people. A lot of these older books are much more valuable to read. We tend to get into the new thing, and reading is kind of a dying art. Force yourself, like the great Charlie Munger, who just passed away last year. He said he never felt productive unless he had a book in his hand. You kind of want to get smarter every day, and that's what you're looking to do. And the best way to do that is to read and try to, I try to read an hour a day if you can. I mean, this is getting into a public announcement for reading, but it's just like, if we can equate it back to what we're doing here, teaching and practicing, you just want to get, like we talk about the 1% rule, you just want to get 1% better a day. Whether it be being smarter, whether it being learning more things, whether it being on the tennis court, if you can just say, I'm out there again today, and just get out there every day, get out there and do something that can make you a little better that day. Just again, 1%. So I try to read as much as I can. I try to read coaching books. I try to read tennis books. I try to read books of bios of successful tennis players as well. Another great book is Open. Agassi's book is probably one of the most successful tennis books probably ever. But there's a great book written years ago called A Handful of Summers, which you should read. It's an incredible tennis book. But this book was written about 1947 by Carl Braun, and he had a successful oil business. He ran oil refineries and had a company and died in like 54, wrote this book in the 40s. And it's just a collection, and it's 88 pages only. So it's kind of hard to find, but I think you can find it. And I think I would read it because what it is, it's a curated book just basically of all his letters to his employees. And they curated this. It's called Fair Thought and Speech. And it just really kind of lessons, very similar to Dale Carnegie, who wrote an incredible book, how to win friends and influence people. But this book is just kind of 15 rules for how you communicate and how you talk. And he built a company to $300 million, had a payroll of $30 million back in 1940s and 50s, and had 5,000 employees. So these things not only work for your company, work for you on the tennis court, work for you in life. And I'll go through some of them. I'll take my time. Hopefully I won't rush. But number one is the living of, it's called the leaven, not heaven, leaven. I always pronounce it wrong. I had to even look it up, learning words. Leaven means the substance on human relations. basically number one is be kind. Don't speak unkindly. A man's character is known by his conversation, they say. We try to do that in work. We try to do that when we're teaching. When you teach and transmit information, you don't have to be, and I'm not trying to tell you to bullshit somebody when they're on the court, but be as kind as you can. In other words, try to tell them, and this is one of the rules too, try to tell them what they need to do instead of what they're doing wrong. A lot of times you get caught up in mentioning every wrong thing they're doing on the court. And your job as the teacher and your job as the student is to try to solve problems and not kind of identify them. You're trying to solve them. By solving them, you're identifying. The problem is if we discuss problems all day, we don't find any answers. So you can be kind in solving problems. You can be kind in your conversation. You don't have to shit all over anybody to get your point across. And a lot of times teachers or anybody on the court is trying to show how smart they are instead of really trying to help the person. That's number one. And it's very similar in the same vein here as don't act superior. I wrote down a couple of notes. Don't spread information down rather than out. So in other words, if I'm the coach or if I'm the boss, I don't want to spread the information downward. I don't want to talk down to people. Again, you're stupid. You don't know what you're doing. You want to talk outward. You want to kind of ask questions and share and say, hey, let's not talk at them, but it says, but rather serving them. Let's not talk of superiors, but of leaders. But let's not tell people, let's ask. Assume a good act at times. We get to thinking that a man should have done a certain thing, or we think there's something he should do. Let's ask him what the reason why. If you didn't like what somebody did, like on the tennis court, if I didn't like the way someone played a point or decided to do something strategically, I like to ask him and say, what were you thinking there? What did you want to do? What were you trying to do? Instead of saying, hey, look, don't do this, do that. Try to get them to problem solve, and that's what you want people to do. You want them to problem solve as much as you can. The last thing I do if I go into a meeting with work or employees is try to tell them what they're doing wrong, tell them what to do. No one wants to do that. No one wants to be micromanaged. It's the last thing they want, and they don't want to be told what they're doing is wrong. You just ask questions. It's very helpful. Don't question too fiercely, too. Then you got to have. Then there's always a balance, right? You can't be interrupting somebody all the time and asking them a bunch of questions like, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? You're just a pain in the ass. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to, and this is like self-awareness. This is your own inner dialogue. Finding, and everybody's different. When I talk to somebody or teach somebody likes me to ask them more questions. Somebody doesn't. And your job is to, dare I say, listen, because we don't listen enough, and figure out. Phil Jackson had a great book. Again, he, great coach of the Bulls and the Lakers, won, I don't know how many NBA championships, 10? I can't even remember now. 8, 10, I think it was 10. But had to treat every player a little differently, Couldn't ride Scottie Pippen, could ride Horace Grant, Michael, everybody was different. You can't treat everybody with the same brush, and you got to be able to listen and understand that. And then don't be too positive. And this is with even in words and how you're talking. Like, you don't want to say obviously, of course, or this stands to reason. You don't want to say this is obvious, because that's you're just trying to assume that everybody's going to agree with you. Don't say, obviously, you're wrong. Obviously, this is what we need to do. And just don't be, and then being too positive is just in general. Also, you got to give people the truth. And you don't have to tell them they're doing a great job when they're not. You're not going to lie to them. You have to be straightforward with them. Don't be stiff-necked. Basically, that means don't be too defensive. What happens is you simply need to learn not only to accept discussion, like he says, but welcome. Oftentimes, we do evil in defense, therefore we do worse. So in other words, when you get somebody that challenges you and you don't like it, you just end up acting worse. So you got to take criticism. You got to try to find, and Charles Darwin was great at this. He always tried to question his beliefs, and that's what you have to do. You have to question them. You can't, and you got to welcome questioning. If I sat as a coach, a tennis coach, if you sat in a group and the team was like, we want this or we want that, and you're like, and they're like questioning what you're doing, you're not just going to simply say, hey, I'm not listening to anybody. Again, it's all comes back to listening. These things, with all of these things in this book, if you listen, you can do them all. So if somebody, and it's a pain in the ass, it's really tough. When somebody tells you what you're doing is wrong, or somebody says to you, hey, they question you, it hits your ego. It's natural. And you've got to learn to welcome questioning, because it makes you more of a complete person. And on the court, when you come off the court and your partner, if you're playing doubles, is questioning you and telling you, hey, you got to be able to communicate back and forth and have it be healthy, and say, hey, you can't go into a hole and feel sorry for yourself. Munger said that self-pity is the worst. It's just a thing you can never have. Once you start feeling sorry for yourself, you just become inconsequential. Don't be unfair. Explain a whole issue. Don't leave parts out. So when I'm communicating with somebody, I have to explain the whole thing. I don't want to leave parts out so I feel better about myself. You can do this personally too. It's again, being straight with the student, but personally with somebody that you're not telling all the truth to, right? So you're not saying everything, but you're technically not lying, but you're not telling them everything. Happens all the time. Like, like when your kid goes out and said, they tell you 4 things, they don't tell you the 5th thing, that they, smashed up the car and they, I don't know, whatever. But, you have to be clear. Don't bluff. Same thing. Don't bullshit. That's just a simple thing. What did I write down here? We trick our ego and play that we know everything. Let's discipline ourselves until it's easy to say, I don't know. So you can't bullshit your way through life. If there's something I don't know, it's better to get somebody that can do it. The great thing is outsourcing work. If I can hire somebody that can do a better job to me, and they can do it at 100% because I've got 20 other things to do, it's a lot better if they do it. The last thing I want to do is let my ego get in the way and say, hey, it's like George being here. Look at all the equipment. Like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I need Georgie to help me out, Georgie. So that's what it is. You have to learn that if he's doing this 100% of the time, he's going to do it a lot better than I am. So don't bullshit. What does this say? Don't beg. Don't beg. Don't beg for work. Like, you don't want to be apologizing and asking and begging and blah, 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 and all these stuff. You have to let that come to you. What did I write down? Apologies or explanations are not even worth it. Let's see. Call for. Let me see what I wrote here. Don't beg for work. People don't like it. If then we speak up for some better job that's open, let's not fill our words with hoping or thanking or earnest behavior. Hey, there's Aileen McEnroe doing the. Hey, Aileen, see, this is a live show. Aileen, how's your life? Good? Nothing, Aileen, nothing. How's your life? I'm always be honest with Aileen, George. She's a great tennis player. So don't beg for stuff. It just doesn't work. Don't carry tales. Don't get someone's confidence and then on the other hand start bullshitting them. Again, he called this don't carry tales. Sometimes we get someone's trust and then we manipulate it. That's the worst thing to do. Some people are just bullshitters right away, but then some people fake you. They do the right thing. If somebody... It's a great story from Warren Buffett, who's like, Buffett's like super regular guy, and we'll go to McDonald's, one of the richest guys in the world, and the best way to say, to bluff me would be like that, act like that kind of guy. Say, hey, Warren, I only spend $12 a day, I only do this and that, but that's bullshitting someone because you know them to get their confidence. You don't want to do that. Because all you have is your name. If I, on the court, bullshit someone and say, hey, you're a fantastic tennis player, and you're really not, and you're average, that's just going to be, you're going to end up hating me in the end. The parents are not going to end up liking me. The adult will not end up liking me if I tell them, hey, Aileen, you're getting taller. As I notice players, she's getting tall. How tall are you, Aileen? How tall are you? She's 5'8", she's getting tall. Aileen's only in 8th grade, right? Yeah, wow. So she's getting tall. And I'm not lying to her, she's getting tall, she's getting at being a better player. So don't bullshit people. It just doesn't work. Don't rebluff. Explain why, disagree, don't be short, and don't be secretive. So in other words, don't just disagree without explaining. Don't just say this is wrong. You have those people around that always are disagreeing. They just want to disagree because it makes them feel important. I always say either you agree, disagree, or get out of the way. You don't, either way, like, don't just disagree. You're either agreeing or getting out of the way. Because what happens is, it just becomes a bottleneck. And you can't get roped up into people that just disagree all the time because they'll just stifle everything you do. Don't snap, don't scowl, which is obvious, you know. Don't blemish, do good deeds. And then I think I got 3 more here, George. There's so many of them, but they're so good. It's only 88 pages. There's 3 more. What do I got? Oh, boy. Eco. Concession. Little by little. Let me read the little by little. Concession means, obviously, you have to give in sometimes. You cannot, like, be headstrong all the time. You have to give in and understand that you're not always going to get what you want, and that's fine. The player's not always going to do what you want. The player's going to want to do, say if you have a strategy for the player really wants to do this, you're really going to have to understand, hey, maybe they're just comfortable doing that. So you can't force them into something they don't want to do. So that's a huge thing. Little by little. In human relations, I'm reading this part, perhaps more than in other things, success and failings is made up of little things. That's great. I mean, that's obviously little by little. Success comes from little things, small little changes, not these big things you see in a movie that, oh my God, I had this epiphany and everything changed. It's just these small little things. And if you don't realize that, you'll miss those things and you'll just let them go. But once you notice those little things, they become huge if you double down on them. So little by little, like we said, 1% rule, get better each day, learn a little bit more. And if you become smart, it's your duty to act that way and act mature. But if you do it a little bit at a time, do these things, follow these rules, it's great. It's a great little book. You can find it on Amazon. I think so. I think I got this on Amazon, Georgie. I'm not really sure, but hopefully this helps. 15 of them. Everybody, that was a quick one today. Answers in the actions. I hope you do well. Have a good week, and good luck. Hey, everybody. Hope you like the podcast. Please share it with your friends, anybody that you know, anybody that's into tennis, anybody that's into bettering themselves. Share it.